The Dr. Ray Podcast is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio. Here's today's monologue with Dr. Ray Burendi.
The old Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was really a dictatorship, and you could not speak against the government. You couldn't speak against the state. You risked very much your well-being, your safety. Probably could speak about other things, though, in terms of morality, in terms of social issues, perhaps, but you just couldn't speak against the state. In some respects, what's happening in our culture is much more broad than that. You're still able to speak against the state, somewhat, but there are a lot of other things you can't speak against. You can't say it. You are not permitted to say it, because if you do, there will be repercussions. You're not even allowed to raise questions regarding particular issues. Going back a few years when the COVID pandemic began, I started raising questions about some of the things that were being done in response to it. Oh, my. Ooh, doggy. I definitely got some email telling me to shut up. Not allowed. Horrible, awful, terrible. Well, since then, and I was just raising questions. I wasn't even giving what I thought was my opinion regarding this. I was simply saying these are questions that need to be asked regarding collateral issues. You couldn't speak about that. Right now, you can't speak about gender issues. You're not permitted. If you speak in any way other than complete and total support of every child who says, I have gender confusion and that needs to be accepted as automatically legitimate, no questions asked, you get in trouble. One of the very tricky, sleight of mind, if you will, ways that they do this, is they call it hate speech. Hate speech is anything, for example, that would have been not too long ago considered an agreeable moral position in our culture. For example, there have been reported stories of individuals who have either been suspended from their job or have run into the buzzsaw of social canceling because they said something as horridly controversial as they believed that marriage was between a man and a woman, or that men should not compete in women's sports. Saying things like that have gotten a lot of people in trouble, labeled hate speech. There's a country in Europe, and I think several of them already have this, but there's another one coming about. I won't mention this country's name. Essentially, they're going to codify into law that you can't say anything publicly that would make someone feel violently offended. It's brilliant. It is a brilliant move to essentially squash any kind of speech that involves traditional Christian morals. Whether you agree with those traditional Christian morals or you don't, it should still scare you that people cannot say certain things that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, were pretty much just considered duh. Not now. They're hate speech. And the paralyzing effect has been incredible. The majority of people believe that biological men, should not compete in women's sports. Men have just a physical advantage. That's reality. But very few people will come out and say that. Very few. Their attitude is, I won't get in trouble. I'll just keep what I think to myself. Well, that means really, if you're a Christian, you can't say anything that you believe to be Christian morality given by God. You can't. You're not allowed. If it goes against the reigning social ideologies, you're not allowed to speak it. You're not permitted. In some respects, this is a much, much wider crushing of speech than in those dictatorships where you're not allowed to speak against the government or your leader, relatively narrower than ours, which is you just can't speak against anything that the opinion and shaping people in our culture decide are to be the completely accepted ideas. You can't do it. You're not allowed. I think the only way we will break through this is that more and more people will have to not be afraid to speak up. It's the only way. As long as the majority, and I do believe it is a majority, won't say anything out of fear. What will they do to me? What will I risk? What will happen? What kind of social opprobrium will I get hit with if I speak this? I've seen reports of people who have put things on their Facebook or on Twitter that was just an expression of what they believe morally. It wasn't hatred toward anybody. They got hammered. Not just by others on that social media platform, but by their employer. What is going on? Is it hate speech to say this is what I believe? Is that hate speech? Who defines what hate speech is? Dr. Ray, there are things that are hateful and nasty and awful. I agree. But the thing that frightens me is that what is now considered hate speech is defined by the reigning cultural norms, which for the most part have abandoned any kind of Christian morality. If someone, for example, would be so bold as to say, their view of this is that an abortion is murdering an innocent child, they get a lot of trouble for that. A lot of trouble. Not permitted. So, it's a brilliant move to label anything that the reigning cultural gurus would find offensive as hate speech. Brilliant. Who wants to be hateful, right?
More of Dr. Ray's monologues can be found on his website, drray.com. Monologues as well as full-length programs that the doctor is in can be heard at AveMariaRadio.net and EWTN.com/radio.